Hi, welcome to Business as Unusual. I'm John Payne, founder of Noisy Little Monkey, and this is a webinar where we help people do better marketing, better sales, and grow their business or their employer's business. You're like most of us, and you have to work for what we call the man. I'm joined today by the fantastic Andi Jarvis, who is the founder of Eximo Marketing or Eximo Marketing?
Both, either. I
Both.
go Eximo. Some people say Eximo. I'm not like a Maximo Park who got really upset if you pronounced it badly. So I'm fine. I'm just happy you're talking about me.
He's the founder of Eximo Marketing and also is the host of the Strategy Sessions podcast, which is really good, very worth a listen. Every fortnight. I thought it was every month. No wonder I'm so far behind.
Every fortnight.
And Andy's going to talk to us. We gave him Andy gave himself the difficult title of marketing unsexy products. Andy, tell us, before we jump into how you market unsexy products, tell us about Eximo Marketing.
So, right, well, look, my favorite thing is talking about me. So let's give you a quick dance through how we got here. So Eximo Marketing is a strategy consultancy. So we're not an agency and we're not trying to manage your ongoing SEO, write your Facebook posts for you, blog, shoot your video. It's more about answering the kind of key questions to marketing, segmentation, targeting, positioning, those sorts of things, giving your company the best chance of success. That often leads from strategy into creating marketing plans. I can bore you with the difference between strategy and a plan, but generally speaking, a marketing plan to me has a strategy, tactics, and a calendar. If you've got those three things, it goes from strategy to being a plan. So I often create a strategy for clients and then write them a marketing plan, and then maybe work with their team or their agencies to help them deliver it. So that's what I do. And I work with what I would class as a lot of unsexy clients. I also work with some sexy ones. And the reason is I work across a number of different sectors. So in the last couple of years, I've worked in alcohol marketing for two whiskey brands that you've probably heard of. If you're a whiskey drinker, you've probably drunk at least one of them. Can't talk about it with the NDA, but I can definitely say I did it and it was great and sexy and fun. And I'm currently sat in a client's office who sells technical building products, most of which live inside concrete, inside big buildings. Very unsexy, cracking place, CG in Armagh. And we're doing lots of stuff. The reason I do that is you learn lessons in different sectors that you can bring and spread around. And when you're looking at segmentation, targeting, positioning, you're answering the same questions, really. I think when you get a little bit downstream into delivery, that's where you need to be a bit more specialist. But I think from a strategy point of view, yes, absolutely, you can do just alcohol marketing strategy. I like the variety because it brings you and forces you to think differently and go, okay, in this industry, they do it like this. What can we learn from that to bring into there? So my background, to very quickly go through that, I worked in digital agencies for best part of 10 years, working on some very sexy things. But in one agency, we had Expedia as a client, and we also had a company that made rubber floor tiles. So you would jump straight from one call talking about holidays to New York, and then straight into another call talking about square meterage of rubber floor tiles and how many mils thick they were. It's an interesting world. I've also worked in TV marketing. I've worked in sport marketing for Durham County Cricket Club. So I've done some great sexy marketing products. And I've also worked with some very unsexy ones. And finally, the podcast out every fortnight. I'll pop a link in later on that you can sign up and have a listen. I interview great marketers from around the world to pick their brains, basically. It's an hour-long, long-form discussion. You learn loads about marketing. It's not one of those podcasts where the podcast host gets a company on in the hope that they'll go, wow, this guy's really clever. Let's work with him. It's not one of them. You can spot them a million miles when they're really boring. This is a great, interesting, I find it fascinating. And the next one has Harry Kane, Raheem Sterling, and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain on the promo. And we actually have the rights to use that as well. If that doesn't tickle your fancy and tell you that one's a sexy product, I don't know what does.
Nice. And how did you get into marketing?
I did a sport management degree. I actually went to uni to be a PE teacher. And halfway through uni, I realized I hated being at uni and I hated teaching people. So I hate children anyway. So I decided that wasn't for me, flipped my degree into sport management and ended up getting my first marketing job on the back of that at Durham County Cricket Club. And that was 5 of the best years of my life in terms of learning, developing, and some of the things that kind of hold true to this day. I learned back then, focusing on customers and putting value into things. There's a lot of great lessons I learned there. So that's how I got into marketing. I've since topped that up with an MSc from Ulster University. And I'm getting old now, 20 years or so in marketing, and currently split my time between Belfast, Bangor, Northern Ireland, and Liverpool as well. So I'm based in those two locations.
Right. Cool. So we should get on to unsexy products. It looks like most people would define the product or service that they sell in the chat as unsexy. Thank you everybody for putting it in. Although we do have some people who are doing both. I wonder if some of those are agencies. I guess a lot of them might be agencies, and then there'll be other people with probably we've worked with clients before who've got one sexy looking product which doesn't sell because no one actually wants it, but it looks cool, and then a really boring one which actually sells, and the directors always want to be famous for the sexy looking one, and they don't get famous for that because
listen, I don't understand that either. It's like, oh, let's just look at what's got the pound sign before it, and let's worry about that. The big number with the pound sign, not the little one. Forget your ego. Look at the cash. That's the important thing when it comes to business.
Love it. We talked, when we were talking about this conversation, we talked about defining sexy products, and I think you did it really well. So let's start there and see where we go.
Yeah, so we came up with a title, and then I realized we are going to have to define an unsexy product. And I suppose this came from Stacey McNaught, who is one of my heroes and runs McNaught Digital in Oldham. And she did a presentation at Brighton SEO a few years ago. It was just after Apple had launched the new handset, and you saw all the stuff, all the idiots going out and queuing to get the very first one. And she just made this great point in the way that only Stacey can. And she went, nobody queues around the block to buy a new washing machine. And actually, there's a lot of sense in that. So one of the definitions I worked up with of an unsexy product is no one's going to queue up to buy your product. I've worked in professional sport. People go crazy enjoying queues for that. I've worked in holidays, alcohol. People queue literally to get into nightclubs or queue to get on air. People queue up to get this product and they love it. Is anyone actually going to queue up to get your product unless you're giving something away with it? So I'm in the building trade at the moment, and there's a lot of the time you will get big crowds turn up at building events in the building trade because they're talking to you about a product. Oh, so people are queuing up. No, they're queuing up for the free bacon sandwich that you're giving them. That's hooked them in. The product itself hasn't hooked them in. So maybe that's an unsexy definition. I also worked on another definition, and they both kind of work well together. Nobody naturally talks about your product on social media unless something goes wrong. Now, that to me almost was a better fit. So again, building products, someone's mentioned them for a law firm. Rarely do you ever see anyone tweet about a law firm or post, I use this law firm and I had a wonderful experience with them. No, when shit goes wrong, that's when people start ranting on social media. So is anyone going to talk about your brand on social media unless something goes wrong? If one of those two definitions, this isn't an academic definition. You're not going to be flicking through the pages of Kotler and find this definition of an unsexy product in there. But I think either of those work or both of those work together. Is anyone going to talk to you about you on social media unless something goes wrong? Or is anyone going to queue up to buy your product unless you're giving something else away with it?
Yeah, love that. I love the talking about it on social media. Yeah, your example of a law firm or a builder's merchant. No one is taking a photo of themselves outside influencer style rather than go to the Burj Al Khalifa.
That's it. Heads pushed forward slightly so you don't have any double chins. Toes pointed in so you get the that funny influencer pose that everybody seems to do. Nobody does that when they're waiting outside a pig feed factory. Oh, look at me just picking up another lorry of pig feed. Doesn't happen. So let's stop pretending it does and start resetting our ambitions, particularly with social media, about what that means for our marketing and how we're going to do it. And I think one thing about today that I'd like to get across is that it's not just, there is B2B marketing or boring to boring marketing, I often refer to it as, is chock full of unsexy products, right? From ball bearing suppliers, printer cartridges, cables, lights, right? Almost everything in B2B is unsexy. And there's a few brands who try and make it interesting and fun and sexy, MailChimp, for example. But a lot of B2B marketing is boring. Yeah. But as I said, I refer to it as boring to boring because B2B marketers then make it even more boring by the way they go about it. But this isn't just a B2C world. We've got a law firm. There's a lot of law firms, mostly generally are B2C. Irons, people who make white goods for kitchens. There's a lot of B2C products as well that are probably quite unsexy.
Yeah. So why? I think I might have an answer to this, but it's my answer, and so therefore it's not as interesting as yours. Otherwise, this would just be me speaking to a camera with no one attending. But I guess the question I've got for you then is, why unsexy products? Because I know we both quite like working with unsexy products or unsexy services or unsexy clients. Why?
Yep. So I love it. And so firstly, never, if you're consulting, if you're an agency, never rock into someone's business. And when they're telling you about it, go, oh yeah, you got some really unsexy products here, because that's often a really quick way to be shown the door and got rid of. you might be unsexy, but when you could be in a business that could be turning over hundreds of millions of pounds making little plastic modules. The people who invented them love their product. People love and care about it. And it's a lesson. I do some lecturing at John Moores University, and when I talk to the students there, everybody wants to go and work at Boohoo, Misguided, Nike, Adidas, places like that. And I say to them, it's like, go for those jobs, dream and have those ambitions, but be aware that more than half of you are going to end up working in construction, in boring to boring marketing jobs. And actually, once you get over the ego bit of, oh, I'd much rather tell all my mates I work for this fashion brand, there is so much great stuff to do. You get so much. I don't believe that any old idiot can sell branded t-shirts, right? It's much more difficult than that. But when you come up with a campaign for something that's quite technical, there's one of the things we do here at SDG, lifting hooks that sit in concrete, right? It's incredibly boring. But when you do a campaign for something like that, actually has to get your creativity flowing. Not necessarily creativity in the visual of it, but how do you reach the people? How do you convince them that your commodity product is better than someone else's commodity product? By the very nature of a commodity product is maybe they are quite similar. So where's the business model advantages? Where can you compete on different factors? And when you get all those right and it works, there's no feeling like it, right? Because, we took 0.2% on Nike's trainer sales and it added 2 billion to there. We got a 35% increase in sales for this one thing. I love that sort of stuff. I love these products, and the people who you work with love them too. So if you find the time to embed in that, understand the product, and not just understand the product, but understand the business, the model, the market, you start to get a real richness to it. And that makes the job really sexy, even if the product is unsexy.
Yeah. And it's that thing about sometimes, particularly when people are in-house, when I've spoken to them, they are so drained by the fact that they haven't been able to find the fascinating. That is how we talk about it. Find the fascination in each thing, and there will be something that's fascinating about everything. And once you found that one thing, then it's much easier, as you say, to start to become creative in all sorts of other ways. And you bump into people who've just lost that, and they've gone, look, I feel like I'm ground down, and I don't really know what to do. And you have to go a bit back to basics. I think the other thing that we both agreed on is often there's a really interesting business model behind them. And once you get into that, it lets you often the kind of the germ that started this unsexy business that's making millions, sometimes tens, hundreds of millions. And then you can, once again, it ignites that sort of fire and that passion for otherwise what would appear something quite dull and boring, the little widget. We used to work with a double glazing firm, and they didn't even sell it. They sold it to the people who sell you double glazing. Yeah. And they extrude the plastic. And it was the most, once we visited the factory, everybody was like that. This is insane. They're producing 12 miles of
you have to go and visit when you're doing unsexy products, you have to go on site, right? You can sit in a meeting room, you can have a Zoom call and all you like. You have to go kick the tires, pick it up, feel it, see it, stand next to, and it is usually a guy, but stand next to the guy dragging the plastic out and doing all those things. And you get a feel and a sense for the industry. But the other thing I would say is with unsexy products is when you're doing something that people will queue around the block for, marketing can often become the promotional element. We just need to tell people these things over and over again. It's much more important when you're in an unsexy product world that you have to go for a full marketing view of the world: product, price, place, and promotion. Yeah. Because if it's a commodity product, price is probably the most important factor. Your campaign can be as brilliant and as clever as you like. If your price is miles out of kilter, unless you've invested in brand, which we'll talk about later, then you're not going to get the sale. If it's about, you've got to understand the product, you've got to understand like the logistics and how it gets there, and do you have an advantage there? Can you ship overnight when no one else can do that? Once you get all these bits together, it's really important that when you're looking at unsexy products to do that full product, price, place, promotion view of marketing, not just we are the promotions department or the coloring in department and that sort of thing. You, the Ministry of Pretty Pictures, you have to really get involved in every aspect of the business and understand all those parts of it. And to do that, you've got to get on site. Yeah, which has been hard for the last 2 years, but it's really fun to start getting back out there. So, we've defined unsexy products. We've talked about how actually you can begin to, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. The creativity comes from understanding it and doing the whole thing. And again, people at agencies, us included, will often get annoyed that we're not doing the really cool
marketing. But as you say, normally that product's already marketing itself, and all you've got to do is a bit of promotion. Working on the whole thing is where proper marketers really cut their teeth, I believe. So where would you start if you've got an unsexy product? Where would you where or a client with an unsexy product? Where would you start? I think you've already started to make it sexy because you're getting involved and you're starting to find the beauty inherent in what they're trying to flog. So let's stop talking about them as unsexy products. I feel bad.
Yeah, no, I'm saying as long as the products aren't listening, we'll be okay. So I think I would start by, and look, a lot of these things that I'm going to say is just, you might be sitting and listening thinking, this is just bog standard marketing 101, Andy. And I would say that 85% of my consulting work is going into places and doing marketing 101 stuff, because people go, oh, this is the basics. And I go, right, are you doing them properly? Are you really doing them properly? And then they go, oh, no, let's do them properly. And you'll be amazed at the transformation. But look, I'd start anything, right, by talking to your customers. It is a fundamental underpinning concept of actually hear firsthand from them. So I go into a lot of places and people, you say about, what have you heard from customers? And they'll give you like the NPS score, or they will give you their customer data, or we've got some quant research. This is good, right? I'm not here to criticize quant research. I love it. It gives you scale. It gives you depth. It gives you something you can look at. Fantastic. But I want to hear what's the next step. The next step, sometimes we read all I call them the color comments, the second question with the NPS. If anyone fills that in, you get a lot of information from what people write in there. Fantastic. Or
the free text bit, right?
Yeah, the free text bit. Yeah. So you get the black and white, what's the number, and then you get the color when people tell you a little bit more about it. So you read them, or I read the customer service emails, or we look on the website and we look at the failed searches and stuff like that. So we get a view of what the customer thinks and feels from this. That's fantastic. I absolutely love it. Or they'll give me, like, they'll have devoured a report that an independent researcher will have done for them. We, focus groups, we spoke to 50 customers, or we have this done fairly regularly. And this is the insights that they give us. They give us these 6 pillars that work out. And you're like, love this, absolutely love this. Have you ever actually spoken to a customer firsthand? What do you mean firsthand? Sat in front of them and said, how are you? My name's Andy. What's your view of this business? Don't know about that. Don't know about. Actually talk to them. You could lift the phone and ring them up and go, hello, John, my name's Andi Jarvis. I'm calling from this company. Come and talk to you about your... Why would you do that? Or just get off your ass and go and see them in person. And I'm amazed how many marketers have never, ever, not once, spoken to a customer firsthand. And it just astounds me, like genuinely astounds me. Now, there's some of my clients maybe watching this. I've seen a couple of names going, well, you've never spoken to our customers, Andy. And yes, that is the case, but we're planning to rectify that. Sorry. But look, the way I see it is you've got to get off your ass and go and meet them. If they're on your site, talk to them there. If you can go to their site, talk to them there. If you can't go on site because they're international or there's COVID reasons or whatever, Zoom call or phone call, but talk to them firsthand, right? Ask some questions and then shut up and listen, right? And just ask open questions. Things like, what would be the impact on your business if this product wasn't available? Things like that. So let them talk to you about what would they do if your product wasn't available. I would just go and buy this product. That's interesting. That's a competitor you need to go and look at. Oh, production had shut down because we need that product to do. Okay, well, there's a cost implication to that. Ask a question, shut up and make some notes. Okay. What about, do you use anything else if you can't get our product? Or what did you use before our product came along? Depends what your product is. Is it new? Is it established? Or what is it? What those sorts of things? Or do you, whenever you run out, do you always come back to us? Or do you go and look around or shop around? Or just ask some fairly open questions and shut up. Let them talk back at you and write it down. Now, one customer should not change your whole marketing strategy, right? But that's why you need the quant. You need to triangulate. You need the quant research. I am not criticizing quant research, but marketers these days are data obsessed, because we can see that with data and numbers, you can argue with finance, and finance are the bane of all marketing departments, right? They're like, nope, you can't do that. You can't prove it. And you go, nah, we can prove this now. We've got all the numbers in the world. You need that to have that argument, but you need to mix the black and white and the color to give you the full story. And you need to hear that firsthand. So read the reports from your researchers, go and listen to the focus groups back if you've been recorded, but talk to customers firsthand and hear what they have to say. You'll be amazed what you find out. And those lines, those testimonials, those little bits can filter the way into your marketing material as you move on. So just talk to your customers is my first bit of advice, really.
That's which is brilliant. The funny thing is, we were talking in lockdown one, the beginning of the pandemic. We were talking to Ayat Shakuri from Invest, and she is super hot at CRO. She's written a book called "Hope Is Not a Strategy," which I
Love that
absolutely
line. I love that line.
yeah, love it. But one of the things that she was saying was one of the first thing we do is we know we've got all of this. People don't call us unless they've already got data telling them they've got a problem. But one of the first things we do is go and speak to customers who did purchase a service or repeatedly purchase a product or service. And we just ask open questions. And it's the open questions to existing customers is so, and I'd like to think I'm all right at this. And you mentioned that to me the other day, and I'm like that. I haven't done that for ages. I haven't just got on the phone to our clients and gone, "Why the hell do you use this?" I think it's going to be scary but transformative next time I do it.
I'm a small consultancy. There's two of us, and I always, where possible, go around and deliver Christmas presents to my clients in person. It's not possible for every one of them, and sit down and have a coffee and a natter. And that's not this, right? This is something that's slightly different. And you just go and sit down and you might get an hour. And I look at my diary, I'm like, oh, I'm really busy. I can't commit to those 2-3 days. It's the best 3 days of the year. Sometimes people just tell me about the kids, they tell me about the problems, they tell me about the changes going on in the organization. Other times they're like, oh yeah, give us a ring in January because we've got this thing we want you to look at. But that's not why I'm doing it. But listening to those things, and then you start to think, all right, actually, I could get a guest to talk about that on the podcast, or I could just listening to people. And I struggle with the shut up and listen bit. I really do. And I work really hard on it. I'm actually working with a coach at the minute who tried to, and he did it quite well. He put it into a financial value of how much he thinks I'm losing on a yearly basis by not being able to shut up. Top sales tip, John, you'll know this. You've done years in sales, but when you pitch a number to somebody, when you are pitching your agency or your consultancy, whatever, and you go, this thing's going to cost you X thousand a month, shut up. The next person who speaks in that little exchange loses generally. So if you pitch it and then you say something like, but we might be able to just shave a bit, straight away they've got you and your price is coming down. If you just shut up and look at them, they'll speak first, and at that point you hold your price. And I'm a killer for just straight into it. And he asked me about one client. I told him, and he was like, this is what that's cost you last year by not being able to shut up. Since he's put it in those terms. Anyway, we have a question.
My first, but although I'm not going to shut up now, my first boss in sales used to put it as, once you've given the price, the next person to speak loses. And it just works really well for a competitive person, because you're like, I don't even care whether they buy or not. Now I know the next person to speak loses. And it's just a little game in your head, but it shuts you the hell up. So lovely. Oh, I don't know whether you are, Lucy. I assume you are. There's no need for me to use lovely there, but let's assume you are. Lucy has asked, what's the best way to gather qualitative insight from customers? Well done for spelling qualitative as well, Lucy. I struggle with that one. We often find it difficult to access senior customers, sales, perhaps reluctant to share their target audience. And our surveys are a good approach, market research agencies. What's worked for you in the past?
I say qual because I even struggle to say it, never mind spell qualitative. So I have gone on a journey from despising Net Promoter Score to loving Net Promoter Score in the last few years. It has issues, it has problems, and there's various things. The one thing I like about it is it's bloody simple, right? And people are really used to it now. So you can often get lots of data points from people by sending out Net Promoter Score, because they can see that and they go, oh, look, I can give you an 8 or a 6 or a 7 or whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter what the score is. Please don't try and cross benchmark. Go, oh, our Net Promoter Score is 12. What's yours? It doesn't really matter. What you want to do is have a look at what it is in the direction of travel. That can be a really good way. You send people a 2-page survey, you're immediately going to go send it up to 100 people. You might be lucky and get 10 back. But if you send an NPS survey out, you send it out to 100 people, you might get 50 back. I'd rather have that to work with. If you've got the budget, market research agencies with a properly commissioned survey that they build properly and do well, and when they go after your customers, because they're used to getting told to, what do the military say? Foxtrot Oscar, when people ring them up, they're used to that. And then you can set them targets and say, we need 300 responses to this. And that's their problem to go away and sort out. So budget dependent. But I think if you want to get an early entry into this, I would go Net Promoter Score. You get the black and white of a number, which you can then track. And then you get the color response underneath when people give you a little bit more detail. I would then pair that with phone calls to people and get that firsthand. Sales, the relationship between sales and marketing and PR, the unholy triangle of people who sit around the table throwing shit at each other, going, way more important, way more important. It drives me mad, right? Yeah. We're all trying to sell stuff for the business, just do it in a slightly different way. I feel your pain if your sales team are a bit like that. What I would do is I would take the same approach to your sales team. Don't ever talk to them as a bundle, because they then hunt in a pack and no one ever wants to give. Grab one of the sales team and take them for a coffee. Why is it that no one will give us the sales data? Is it because they don't want to share? You find out why. It's often money related with salespeople. In fact, it's always money related with salespeople. But yeah, I would take the same approach. Talk to your salespeople over a coffee, over a tea, over a pint, whatever it is. Pint's the best if you're a drinker. Truth serum, as it's also known. Once you get past 3, you get all the honesty. So if you can take them for pints of truth serum, do take them there as well.
Yeah, the sales are typically terrified that when you talk to them, you're going to screw up the relationship so badly that they will immediately start to lose commission.
The relationship that was so wonderful, that person hasn't bought anything in 19 years from them, but you can't talk to them because you might mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. We used to do, it probably might be worth asking Lucy as well over that pint, once you start to build a relationship with 1 or 2 salespeople, is to ask if you could go for a ride along or jump on some of their meetings just to take notes. And that will give you the opportunity to hear stuff firsthand from the customer, and maybe even ask to take the customer for a coffee as well.
Absolutely. And if you do that, top bit of advice that I learned the hard way: do not say anything unless you're spoken to in a sales meeting. Just sit down. If you're there on a ride along and the salesperson is selling, make sure that's explained when you get there. A bit like if you go to the doctors and they've got a student with them. If the student started elbowing the doctor out of the way and went, "It's all right, Mr. Jarvis, I'll just come and inject this in your eye," you'd be like, "I'm not comfortable." So if you're there on the ride along, make sure it's explained at the start and that you do not say a word. You just sit and take notes unless someone asks you a question directly, answer directly in as quick as time possible, and then shut up again. Promise you, it's the best way to do it.
They have definitely got a plan. We might look like chaotic wankers, but there is a plan when we're in that meeting, lads.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So talking to your customers, wow, we've really bottomed that out, I think, Andy. It feels like we've talked to most of the customers available. Yeah, what's next? Where do we go next?
This is a little broad and needs a bit qualifying, but I'm going to say invest in your brand. And is this one of those
marketing buzzword bullshit? Tick.
I was going to say it's a marketing wankery term, but let's just step back and understand why I'm saying this. So if you think of unsexy products, typically can be specialist products, technical products, commodity products, that sort of thing, or distressed purchase products. So law, for example, is a classic distressed purchase. Nobody wakes up in the morning. What are you doing tomorrow, John? I'm going to search for a law firm for next time I move house. When are you moving house? I have no idea. Nobody does that. When are you getting divorced? I'm not currently, but I'm going to look for a law firm just in case. What happens?
Actually, that's not a bad shout.
I know. Well, I know. Having met your poor, long-suffering wife, John, I can understand why she's currently searching for it. But it's a distressed purchase. She's just decided, right this minute, I want to get shot of him. And so often at that stage, people are looking for an answer to the problem really quickly and trying to move through that. So it's a distressed purchase. They don't really want it. They have to go and get it. So they maybe search for divorce lawyers in Bristol. I'd probably move away from this now.
It's a classic one.
Divorce solicitors in Bristol, right? Now, at that point, they're served with a page full of results on Google. Now, they may have spoken to a friend and maybe got some things on. What makes those results stand out? Dave's Cheap and Cheerful divorce solicitors will do your 2-for-1 deal, or Solicitor's Brand that you've spent the last 5 years occasionally hearing on the radio, sometimes being on the telly. You've seen them on the paper because they sponsor a local kids footy team. They put out interesting stuff on social media. They've been pushing that over. You may be seeing it. So you see this type of thing and you go, I'll click on that one first. And it's an intangible, right? So we'll come to brand awareness in a minute because I really want to savage that concept. But it's quite difficult to put into a value. But I think investing in a brand is useful. And if you look at more commodity products, if you've ever been to buy a pen, how much is a Parker pen? Somewhere between 5 and 30 quid, depending on which Parker pen. Now, Pilot's probably more interesting. You get 3 Pilot pens for 5 quid. At least with a Parker pen, you might look and you think, oh, this has got a bit more construction to it. A Pilot pen is pretty much the same pen with a few slight differences as the ones you buy 50 for a quid. But they charge £5 and you get 3. Why? Because they invest in the Pilot brand. So you look at that and you go, Pilot pens, where do I know them from? You just do. I can't point to you the time I've ever seen any ads. You just know them. Now, if you invest in a brand, it gives you that opportunity to stand out in a place where everything can look quite similar. Commodity products, technical products. If you're selling technical products, why do people trust you? They trust the salesperson, they trust the brand. So how do you build up? What's every company that's sales oriented worried about? The salesperson leaving. How do you get around that? Invest in your brand. So investing in brand, I think, is really important, even though it does sound like it's marketing wankery and you can't just go to the boss, we need to invest in our brand because Andy said yesterday, and go, right, what does that actually mean? And it's like, you got to define what that means. What does your brand mean to people? Often you can find it written on the walls in an organization. I am in an organization at the minute where it is written on the wall, but the one thing I love about it here is that it actually means something, and the CEO references it, people reference it, and it runs through the whole company. So I love that. But in many places, just walk into the reception, look on the wall, and there'll be some stuff written there. That's supposedly what your brand means. It probably doesn't, but really define what you want your brand to mean to people. And then you can start to ramp that up and use it through your communication. So when you start getting into social posts, when you start getting into this, use that in everything you do. Push that brand piece, push it all the time. Be really picky about how your logo is used. You've got noisy little monkey on your chest. I love it when I go places and, you can't use our logo like that. I love that because you say, no, this is sacrosanct. This is what it means. So technical equipment like that, technical service businesses, commodity businesses, the brand bit is the bit that can make you stand out. Now, I'm going to pause for a second because I know there's a question coming. And when we come back after answering that question, I'm going to talk about things to watch out for and how to avoid going down the death hole of marketing wankery, which I think we've just rebranded.
Okay, we've got a question from Kelly. They ask, we manufacture fairly technical equipment. Most of our clients work under tight NDAs, which means we struggle obtaining case studies. Do you have any tips of ideas of marketing with limited case studies?
When I saw tight NDAs, John, I thought she was talking about your underwear. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm here all week. Try the veal, etc., etc. Couple of things. First of all, I would say, Kelly, and it's easy for me to say at this side of the microphone, have another go, right? Genuinely. So there's a lot of sectors where companies work under really tight NDAs. I've done some work in alcohol marketing, tight finance sector, all sorts of stuff. But there are companies that work in marketing for banks or marketing for interesting financial products or gambling products and things like that, where the NDAs are ridiculous and they still get a case study from them. There's because you think, the case study's got to be so generic because we can't talk about it, that is it any point doing it? And there is a point where you don't want to have something that says, we worked with a business in a sector and helped them grow by an amount we can't tell you about, because that's useless to anyone. But what I would say is with that, flip what you need by a case study. And if you think of a continuum between a quote at one end and a case study at the other end with a testimonial in between about here, right? Think about where on that continuum you will get something from somewhere along that continuum. You're probably just a lot further back where you might be able to get a quote that's talking about how your company delivers your service or what the reasons they love working with you. So not so much about what you did, because that might be difficult to discuss without everyone knowing about it, but about how you did it. Working with Noisy Little Monkey was fantastic. They brought a great energy to the process. They helped us achieve our sales objectives. And the account manager that they put on the team, Andy, was fantastic. And Andy really helped us doing what we needed to do. So something like that is really useful for your business, but doesn't actually say anything about the service that you did for them because it's tight NDA'd. And even the name underneath it might just go current client X sector. So the more you can get, the better. But it's difficult, and I know it's difficult. It's all right me saying, just go and have another go. But it is, it's a tricky one. There is to give a shout out to Joel Kletke, a Canadian man with a German name. If you Google Case Study Buddy, which is one of his businesses, they basically do case studies for companies, and they have a whole little section or a blog or something like that on that website, which talks about how to do case studies in tight NDA organizations. So have a look at Case Study Buddy and see if you can find anything from there, Kelly.
Cool. We've got a couple more questions come in. Do you want to finish your where you were going before, and we'll come to those questions towards the end?
So two things. First of all, brand awareness, right? We all broadly know what the concept of brand awareness is. Who knows about your business, right? Step number one for me in marketing, no one's going to buy from you if they don't know about you. So brand awareness is a really important concept. In 20 years, I've worked with three maybe four businesses that actually measure brand awareness properly, that pay the money for the tracking survey studies, and understand the impact of their work on brand awareness. Loads of companies do it. They tend to be big companies with bigger TV budgets, right? By and large, if you're not doing that, you're probably not tracking brand awareness. You might be tracking direct visits to your website. It's an okay proxy. But by and large, when I go into places and I was like, oh, what happened with this campaign? Oh, we got great brand awareness from it. Usually when people say that, what I hear is the campaign was a complete shit show, didn't work to do anything, never sold a thing. So we're going to try and defend a pile of steaming shit by saying we got brand awareness from it. That's usually what people mean when they say brand awareness, right? Yeah. So let's step away from that. If something fails and is a complete mess, put your hand up and go, this didn't work. Here's what we learned from it. And here's what we're going to do different next time. Let's do that instead of saying it was brand awareness, because you'll never get anyone to invest in brand awareness if you just put in vague bits of shit at them. The other thing I would say is be careful with brand purpose, right? I love brand purpose as a concept. I love it when it's done well. I hate it, absolutely despise it when it's been done badly. My favorite example is when I saw Cadbury's Dairy Milk in India, who solved racism by creating a chocolate bar that had dark milk and white chocolate in 3 rows, 3 rows, and 3 rows, and sold it as the Unity bar in India. Now,
thank goodness they did that.
Yeah, oh man, look, racism solved in India. Ta-da! Thank you, Cadbury's. You've done a wonderful job. Now, look at the history of Cadbury's, right? They were formed by the family, the Bonville family, and it was a collective. It was a place that developed a social enterprise effectively before anyone even did that for them. They built schools for the kids. You don't need to go.
They built cities, Bourneville.
Cities, yeah, Bourneville. Right? You can go and visit it. You do not need to make up crappy chocolate bars, reconfigure your whole production process and spend millions at it to create this thing that they had to pull within a day because everyone thought it was a joke, when you've got this great heritage to build on. So I don't get that. But let's be honest, if you're making bearings for somebody, or does anybody really want to buy a bleach that's going to teach the world to sing? Nobody cares. So when you're doing sexy products, be careful how you use brand purpose, right? Be ambitious with it. Shoot for the stars with it, but ground it in practicality. To a lot of companies that sell unsexy products, what brand purpose means is understanding what the key elements of the brand are, and then finding a charity of the year that you can really get behind and really support and let that do it for you. So don't get blinded by brand purpose too much. Find something practical and set some ambitious targets for it, and then just run at it and go for it.
Yeah. The no one cares thing reminds me of Stephen Bartlett came and spoke at one of our conferences years ago when no one knew him. I liked him. I liked his early stuff.
Before he turned into a bellend.
Yeah, exactly. No, he was on the way then, but as I say to everybody, he gave us a little bit of a difficult time. But if I was 21 and that successful through what looks like sheer hard graft, well, I was 21, not even a tenth as successful, and I was a total arsehole nearly all the way through my 20s. So yeah, no, he was a lot nicer than I've ever been. He was a little bit difficult, but yeah, he said something really interesting about social media. If you're a brand, almost any brand, even if you're selling ice cream, no one cares. No one cares about you. And yeah, it's the same with that brand, particularly that inauthentic brand purpose, when people are passionate about ball bearings and their ability to smooth the wheels of trucks. And you're like that. You're not passionate about that. You might, in fact, you might be, but no one else in the world. One nerd.
My issue with Bartlett is he seems to be trying to take over Gary Vee's role as village idiot for some reason, of putting out some semi-prophetic sounding nonsense every day, most of which is just utter bullshit because people seem to click like on it. But anyway, he's making a fortune going around and talking, exactly. Which is something I'm not doing. I'm probably just jealous. But I think one thing, great segue into social media though, because one thing about unsexy products is you go to a social media event, you go to learn something about social media. They'll tell you about making it interactive, about having discussions, about inviting comments and asking questions with your social media to make it a two-way discourse. It's social, remember, it's not broadcast media. Go back to the definition of unsexy product. Nobody wants to talk about your product on social media unless there's something wrong. So change your gear in your mind and just think, let's embrace broadcast, right? Let's broadcast some interesting things about the brand, about the service that we offer, about the product that we offer, and hell, let's try and sell as well. You know, where I am at the minute, SDG, I don't know how much I can say, but there's product posts have been put up about a certain product that we have here that can really help with vibration and acoustics. And that has sold products now because it's been on social media. In the tens of thousands of pounds worth of product sold.
Wow, nice.
Via Facebook posts, organic Facebook posts, right? Because we talk about the problem that this thing solves for a client. So by doing that, we're opening the door. So don't worry, don't sell all the time, but don't be afraid about selling on social media. People aren't going to jump on and tell you how much of an amazing time they've had, or here's my new Nikes, or here's my new ball bearings. Doesn't happen. So let's just broadcast, talk about what the key things in your brand are that you've already defined, because we've talked about brand, and sell a little bit as well. Not salesy, but don't be afraid to sell. Don't be afraid to try and generate leads. It's got to be there.
Yeah. We've got a couple of questions. We've got one from Andy, who works with me and says, if we have difficult bosses, is how he opens his question. Which I find a little bit strange, Andy. We're going to have a meeting after this where I discipline you. We're not, obviously. If we have difficult bosses, how can we justify a day on site instead of doing proper work marketing? Is it just a matter of making quick customer calls in between other tasks?
A great question. I hate it when people say great question on lives, but yeah, look, it is a good question, right? Depending on geography, because this can take all sorts of different forms. But if the customer is local, start off with a half day. And sometimes you've just got to end up doing the spade work in your own time, maybe getting back quicker. Work. It's awful that you have to do that. But whenever you can get on site with somebody, just write a little one-pager. This is what I saw. This is what I learned. This is what's new. This is what I'm going to do with that information. Ping it to your boss. Saw this. This is fantastic. I'd really benefit once a quarter being able to go and spend a day on site. Let me tell you that the senior team at Currys, one of the biggest digital retailers, digital products in the country, every year spend about 4 days in store helping customers buy computers and stuff like that. Why? Because it's really important to do. I would try and get any time you can on site, write a little one-page report about it, send that to your boss, and then ask for some more time again and try it that way.
Yeah, I think it's less so with services, but definitely with products. It's almost essential, I think, to try and do it. I really like your advice about start local, even in your own time, and that one pager. I should just point out that one of Andy's clients is in the Black Forest in Germany, and they are a ERP consultant, which is very not sexy. But Andy, you, just to be clear, you cannot go to the Black Forest for 3 or 4 days to have an enjoyable time with one of our favourite clients, as much as I would like. Azim, and I will call him the lovely Azim because I know him, has asked, what's the biggest issue or setback that you've had when marketing unsexy products, and how did you overcome it? Can you tell Azim's got his own podcast? That's better than any question I've had written down in the last 20 episodes of this thing.
What's the biggest problem with unsexy products? A lot of B2B unsexy products have sales teams attached with them. And sales teams, target driven, do things a certain way and generally achieve target, otherwise they end up out of the job. It can be quite difficult to introduce new thinking into it. So sometimes you just have to change your ambition a little bit, get some small wins to build trust, and that gets the sales team on side with you. Every sales team in a B2B organization will always view a marketer, a new marketer, especially an outside consultant, until they start to build trust by showing them some wins along the way. Once they've got some wins along the way, they then start coming to you and going, how do we get more of that? So sometimes it just takes a little bit longer than you think.
Nice. And Alex has said, and this might be about Alex's particular product, maybe. How do you put personality into an unsexy?
So 2 things. First of all, you can take the MailChimp approach of creating a character. And there is some interesting case studies other than MailChimp where you can put a bit of personality into a character. It's a very SaaS sort of thing to do, but it does have a bit of a history. If you think of like the Marlboro Man going back through the years, characters, the Michelin Man as well, because you can give them their own little personality. But it's a multi-year thing to do that, and you've got to get buy-in from the top, because it can't be a marketing thing. It has to be a company-wide thing, and how are you going to do it? The other thing, to come back to a presentation I made for that awful online conference, Digital Gaggle, that's called.
Never heard of it.
Didn't know, which I'm sure the John Payne will put in the show notes if it's available. A lot of unsexy products that are technical end up being quite feature-driven in marketing. When you write the content, you've got, say, your features. So this product does X, Y, and Z. Ask yourself the question, which means that? This product is a double-walled water bottle. Which means that? And then answer that question. So which means that it keeps your water hot or it keeps your water cold. Then ask yourself that question one more time. Which means that? You can always get a refreshing drink at any time of day. Wonderful. Now spin that round the other way. So instead of going, we have double-walled water bottles at 50 pence a unit, which is all that you see in commodity products world, you see, get a refreshing drink any time of day or night because your water stays cold for 24 hours due to our double-walled water bottle. Start with why and go through that. But what you don't ever do with which means that is write that in your copy. So start with feature, which means that, advantage, which means that gives you a benefit. And then spin it round and tell the story from benefits, advantages, and features. But the key thing is don't write which means that, because otherwise it looks like it was written by a serial killer. We do this, which means that, which means that. We did this, which means that. And you're like, whoa, who wrote this copy? AI taking over. So yeah, which means that is the answer to that question. So either have a mascot or ask yourself, which means that twice.
Which means that twice. That's, again, an old sales thing, but it was always the once. And then spinning it round is just a thing of beauty, mate.
Back to front. Yeah, absolutely. So features, advantages, benefits, fab, and then you tell the story, baff. But if you remember fab, go with that. And if you can't remember it, give us a shout and I can send you links to either that Noisy Little Monkey presentation or something else. You're welcome.
Jill's asked one final question before we bail. If you want to scare yourself about GA, go and watch a webinar from last month on the website. It's really useful. She's not scary. GA4 is terrifying. If you've not used it before, and you need to look at year-on-year data, go and install it now. Do you, or does anybody, also use PASS? Problem aggregates.
It's not one I've used, but there are different ways of tackling it. What I like about Fab, and which means that is people get it really quickly. Even non-market salespeople, everyone gets it. In terms of staff are doing case studies, situation, task, activity, result, is it, and things like that. So there's lots of different ways, and I think it doesn't really matter. Find the one that works for you, because if that makes sense and you can explain it well, it carries the room, and that's all that really matters, is the room comes with you when you're doing it.
Yeah, excellent. I think we're done. Thanks ever so much for coming, everybody. Thank you so much, Andi, for the thought and preparation you've put into this and giving us so many good ideas, as always, and just being one of my genuine friends in marketing, although we've only ever met once. So I think Andi probably doesn't think he's a genuine friend of mine.
A lovely time as well. And thank you. And please do download the podcast strategy sessions. Download the podcast. It would mean the world to me.
We will put the podcast, your business, and anything else that we can in the follow-up email so that everybody gets it, even those of you who are watching on the recording. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.